All advice given is for general information purposes. All legal cases are different, and you should seek the advice of your own attorney before acting or making decisions. No attorney-client privilege applies to communications on this show, and no attorney-client relationship is created by calling or writing in. Attorney Rominger practices only in Pennsylvania and maintains his primary office in Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
Hey, good afternoon. Carl Rominger here, 540-0580. Get in on the talk line here. If you have a legal question, legal concern, we'll answer it here on the air. Whatever you want to talk about. Your neighbor's tree falls down in your yard. Your kid was hit in their car. You've had a car accident yourself. You want to get rid of your dopey husband. Whatever you want to talk about. 540-0580. Carl Rominger here. Of course, you guys know we like to talk a little bit about the gun laws around here. And a little later in the show, we'll talk a little bit more about it. But in a case called People v. Aguilar, some would-be criminal turned out not to be a criminal because the Illinois law that says that you shan't carry a handgun outside of your home. Of course, it says bars the carrying of uncased, unloaded guns outside a person's home, land, or fixed place of business. The Illinois Supreme Court found that there is a Second Amendment right to carry a gun both in and out of your house, and therefore that charge is invalid. It's very interesting. 540-0580. I got a couple calls coming in on the line right now, but I'm told that we're having some problems with line one. So if you call and it just rings endlessly, and I say endlessly, hang up and try again, because as good old Bob Durgan used to say, something wrong with these phones and it's driving me nutty. Apparently lightning struck. And I knew this the other day because I was listening to WHP and it went off the air for a little while. Is that when it went off the air the other day, Shane? When the lightning hit it? Yeah. That's what happens when you play with electricity. Jeff, you're on WHP 580. What's going on?
Yeah, hey, I have a question. Is it legal for the state police, or actually any police, to sit in private property when they're doing their speed traps?
Well, it's not your concern, and what I mean by that is, move along, sir. Now, what I seriously mean by that is, that's between the landowner and the police. So if I come out and I see the police on my land, I certainly may chase them off, okay?
Uh-huh.
But whether you get picked up for speeding or not, and whether the police were trespassing on somebody else's land isn't an issue for you to raise. You have no standing to complain of that.
So if I went back and asked the landowner, did they give the police...
No, you're not getting it. It doesn't matter vis-a-vis your case. His violation of the landowner's rights, or not his violation of the landowner's rights, has nothing to do with your speeding case.
Got it.
You don't have standing, we say. So let me give you another example. The police walk illegally into my field. They walk all the way across my field to the far end, and as they come out of the end of the corn... They don't leave my field, but they get to where the corn gets short at the end, you know?
Uh-huh.
And they look over to your backyard, which butts up against the cornfield, and they see the marijuana plant.
Uh-huh.
And you complain because you say, hey, the police looked into my backyard without my permission. The police officer say, well, I was standing on somebody else's land, and coming from their standing in their cornfield, I could see your marijuana growing by your tree in your backyard. And your farmer buddy says, I didn't want the police out there. In fact, I told them they couldn't go out there. Doesn't help you.
Okay.
All right?
All right. Well,
By the way, while we're talking about motor vehicle incidences, if you go to my Facebook page, you can see my newest post from my stop by the state police last night. They said I was weaving on the road.
They said you were what?
I was weaving. It's called I left the Trindle Bar in Carlisle, okay?
Uh-huh.
And when you leave the Trindle Bar, for some reason, magically, everybody who pulls out of the parking lot there is weaving. Because as I pulled out, I saw the squad car immediately slide in behind me. And, of course, I dutifully waited to be pulled over. And sure enough, I'm like, well, imagine that. Looky there. I pulled out of the bar parking lot, and they pull me over. And what's the answer? Oh, you were – I said, what's the probable cause, sir? And he says, you were weaving. Now, we didn't get that part on tape. I by the time I got the cell phone up and running and got a little bit of a tape, but it basically ends with them going, oh, there's nothing here. You can leave. And I'm like, yeah, there's nothing here. That's right, because A, I'm not drunk. B, you guys had no reason to pull me over. And C, it's a pretext. But, hey, guess what? Had I been 3 sheets to the wind, I would have lost the case, and maybe I still should go to jail for drinking and driving, but the Constitution would have been scrapped in the meantime, too.
Especially if they were were parked in someone else's property.
Well, there's a little. I know where they hide out there. It's funny. I'm thinking about some night just going out there and getting the cameras set up to begin with, and just get them to pull me over. I need to borrow your car though, because if they see the plates, they'll probably figure out it's me trying to bait them.
Speaking about that, I mean, after you pass a speeding trap, you flash your lights to somebody else. Can they do anything about that?
Oh, big controversy years ago in Cumberland County about that back in the early 90s. Some guy in Middlesex Township flashed his lights to warn somebody. So the Middlesex, I'm sure it was Middlesex. It couldn't have been North Middlesex. I'm pretty sure it was Middlesex Township Police. Pulled him over and charged him with improper use of his bright beam, or his high beams, okay? And, of course, it turns out in the statute that there's only certain conditions and you can't have your high beams on when you're so close to another car, right? So technically they were right. He violated the high beam statute. On the other hand, in the PennDOT driver's manual at the time, it was suggested that you could flash your high beams to alert other drivers to traffic incidences and problems up ahead, Because legitimately, it's also used not just to warn about police, but also like maybe there's an accident, slow down kind of deal.
Right.
And that was actually in the driver's manual, not in the law. And as I recall, I think he was initially convicted, and then a judge may have later acquitted him, basically saying that it was de minimis, like no big deal. But at the time, the state police were asked about it, and they weighed in through their publicity office and the news articles to basically say, and this was in the Patriot and the Sentinel, again, back in the 95, somewhere around there, that they didn't have a problem with it because they concluded that it caused people to slow down. And since the whole point of speeding enforcement was just to get people to slow down and drive the speed limit, anything that worked was fine with them. Did I lose you? I think I lost Jeff. 540-0580, Carl Rominger here answering your legal questions. Don't forget to get over to Harrisburg Beer and Cigar, 384 Union Deposit Road, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. They have got a great selection of cigars and, of course, great selection of beer. I was there this past Wednesday. Took some friends over there to show them how impressive the humidor was, and they can vouch for it. If you need to liquidate an estate or business, and by the way, if you want to get on the air here and talk about anything, it's 540-0580. If you need to liquidate an estate or business, I recommend you call RJ Gold Auctions. He can buy outright or sell your items at auction. RJ Gold can be reached at 645-0061. He purchases outright items such as medals, pins, patches, tokens, awards, and badges, and most historical collectibles. He can pay you right away. RJ Gold, 645-0061. He's on 6th Street in Harrisburg. Hey, and plan to attend RJ's awesome auction Sunday, September 29th at 1 p.m. at the American Legion in Harrisburg. PA licensed auctioneer AU005798. Whew. Boy, oh boy. Don't forget about CDL Labor Logistics, too. They're looking for qualified commercial drivers. 866-293-1880. These crazy phone lines are driving me nuts. And say, Shane, I can tell there's something weird going on with the phones here because we'll get Denny here on the air in a second. But line 1's doing nothing, and then line 2's doing nothing, and it's skipping right to line 3. Isn't that suspicious? It always comes in on 3? So it goes 1, 3, and then 2? 3, 2, 1. Ah, interesting. I did not know that. I always thought it was 1, 2, 3. See, I've been here 4 years, and I just didn't even ever notice that. I guess it's because the phone lines are always full. Denny, you're on WHP 580.
Hello.
Hey, hello.
Hey, Carl. Got a question about a contract between an elderly farmer and a person that is farming his fields.
Okay.
And he sees an opportunity to purchase the farm, and he buys it from a woman that's 100 years old and tells her that the farm is worth $330,000, and it's really worth $700,000.
Okay.
But she trusts him because he's been around. The same lawyer represents her and the buyer in this agreement.
Okay.
It wasn't a mortgage; it was just a contract.
A sales agreement.
Yes. So my question is there anything unethical about a lawyer representing both parties and a lawyer ripping off an elderly woman
Well, let me ask it this way. You say the lawyer was buying the farm. A lawyer's buying the farm?
No, it was someone that was farming their field.
Okay.
And the lawyer represented that individual as well as the...
Well, and how's the old lady sure she was represented by the lawyer? What made her believe that?
Well, she's deceased now.
Right, but I mean, what made her believe? I mean, I'm asking, why did she think that lawyer was her lawyer as well? I mean, did he write her an engagement letter and say, I'm your lawyer for this contract? Or
Nope.
did he simply contact her on behalf of his person and say, he'd like to propose a sale and here's what it is?
Yes.
Okay, well, first of all, he may not have been representing her, so that solves the problem entirely, right? If I sent you a letter if I sent you a letter in the mail, and I don't know where you live, but let's just say you lived at 1313 Mockingbird Lane, right?
Right.
And I send you a letter, and I say, hey, that's an old junk heap you live in up there. And, of course, you don't seem to realize the historical value and the movie connection and then the TV connection to the address or whatever. And I'll give you $100,000 for it, and I flip it for $500,000. I send you a contract. Am I your lawyer because I sent you the contract on behalf of my client? And the answer is no.
Okay.
Now,
but if he represented her in her estate as well.
Now, what do you mean by in her estate? Like she used him for the estate? Or
Yeah.
he had done estate work for her previously?
No. At the same time that this deal was going on.
Okay, so how did that happen? I mean, what work did he do on the estate? She's still alive, right?
No, she's deceased.
Well, if she's deceased, and then how did he get involved in the estate?
Oh, well, prior to her being deceased.
That's what I'm asking. What did he do for her? Did he write her will and stuff?
Yes.
Okay, now you're getting somewhere. Now, I got to go to break. When we come back, we're going to talk about this because this is a very interesting scenario, okay? I want you to hold.
Okay, thanks.
Well, welcome back, 540-0580. So what happened was on Wednesday when that big lightning rolled through, they were telling me that about 40% of the equipment over here got fried. They had put a fire extinguisher on the news board. So imagine that, direct hit on the station. And
You want bread?
Ray, hold on, and I'm going to talk to Denny here, all right? All right. Denny.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to this question we were talking about.
Okay.
So you're saying that this lawyer who wrote let's agree on a couple things first. Let's
Okay.
For purposes, this is the problem, okay? Whenever we talk about legal hypotheticals or real life questions or anything, the facts can always vary, okay? So for instance, somebody might say that somebody was ripped off, but then when you look at the facts of the thing, the value isn't so clear, and it's not so clear that there would have been a windfall, and in the final analysis, there may not even be a windfall, but somebody just felt somebody was ripped off. But here we're going to go ahead and say that somebody purchased this land from this elderly woman at a bargain basement price that, had she been advised adequately, okay,
Yes.
she wouldn't have sold it for. Okay, let's start with that proposition.
Okay.
Then let's say that she was engaging the services of a lawyer who represented her in her estate planning, okay? Doing her will and other things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds right so far.
So far.
Then a guy who rents the land from her comes to that attorney and says he wants to buy it. Now, here's what I don't know, so let's ask this question. Do we know how that person came to her attorney or why they went to her attorney?
I don't know.
Okay, because that would be interesting to know, too. Like, for instance, if she and the guy had sat down at the kitchen table and she said, well, I'll sell you the farm for $350, even though it's worth $700, and here's my lawyer's name, just call him and he'll write up the paperwork, right?
Right.
Then maybe it's not the same as if the guy called up the lawyer and said, hey, I want to approach this woman about buying some land and I want you to be my attorney.
Okay.
The best form there would still be when the guy calls into the attorney and says, well, Mrs. So-and-so says you're her attorney and there's a contract. I would say to the guy, okay, have her call me. I'm not going to get all the details from the other side.
Right. Yep.
Because I want to verify everything. Now, here's a little problem. Lawyers, and remember I said bad advice about value. Was it bad legal advice or bad financial advice? So if a client comes into me and says he wants to enter into a business contract, and these are the terms of the contract, and I write the contract, I don't think I have a duty as the lawyer, okay, to recognize that the business terms are bad.
So as that lawyer, would you recommend that they get an assessment?
Well, now let me ask. That's right. Now, then I would say, but let's talk about the business terms, right? So I'm not sure I'm obligated to catch that the business terms are bad, okay?
Okay.
But here's a good question, right? How about whether the contract's a fair deal overall? Now, I'm not dealing. So let's back up for a second. I'm not dealing with sophisticated business people, however, right?
That's correct.
And I've already represented myself to this woman as someone who's going to help her with her estate planning, okay?
Yes.
So let's back up another notch. Estate planning is problematic because it's not strictly law, is it? There's a lot of decisions that have to be made that aren't clearly legal decisions. They're factual decisions. How much money do you want to leave to your kids? Do you care if you leave money to your kids? Do you want to maximize your income, or do you want to maximize your savings? Do you want to try to defer tax as long as possible, or do you prefer strategies that give you more freedom early on? In other words, a lot of it becomes financial questions, and a lot of those financial questions and decisions have to be capped with numbers, because whether or not I should recommend to you a irrevocable trust versus a family partnership agreement versus doing nothing would have a lot to do with the value of the land you hold, right?
Right.
So theoretically, once I've undertaken to advise this woman on her estate, I think a strong argument could be made that I've already gotten involved with helping her value things, at least at one level. And when I say helping, your comment's right. Say, well, how much is your farm worth? Now, some of my clients come in and they know to the penny, right?
Nope.
Other clients come in and they say, I don't know, the tax assessment's a good value, isn't it? And then I laugh and say, heck no. The tax assessment could be off by hundreds of thousands of dollars, too high or too low. You might have been wrong not to have challenged it years ago, or if it was low, you probably always left it alone. And it's not going to reflect current market conditions. So let's get a CMA, which is where a current market analysis, where a realtor comes out, or a full-fledged appraisal, right?
Right.
And at least we'll have a figure, because you're not planning on selling it, we'll at least know what it's worth for estate planning purposes. So it seems like the lawyer probably already has a problem here. And if he was going to represent both sides in the drafting contract, I would want to know who asked what. Now, on the other hand, I have had cases where, I say to the client, this is probably worth more money than you realize, and I'm not sure, because sometimes I think as a lawyer it's okay. I don't have to all the time catch the business aspects, but I can sometimes point out to clients, listen, I see this agreement you want to sign, and legally it looks fine, but I did notice one little problem. Had you thought about how you're going to make money under this situation? And the client says, well, here's how. And sometimes I'm like, oh, okay, now I understand. Or other times I'm like, well, yeah, I'm still not understanding, because it doesn't look like you're going to make any money if you do it this way. So I just had a client ask me the other day. I'll give you an example. He said, this vendor's going to pay me $3,000 every time I do something, okay?
Right.
But then they want me to guarantee it for a certain period of time with no additional costs. And I was like, well, how long will that last? He says, well, that's the problem. They want me to guarantee it for a period where I may have to do 3 or 4 or 5 replacements sometimes, in other cases none, but I'm not going to make any money in those situations. And I was like, well, don't enter into a contract where you're not going to make any money in some situations, unless that's just very rare. But what you're telling me is, and it's an employment scenario, so it involves, lots of turnover with potential employees and things like that. And I said, so you need to go back to them and find some common ground where, you explain your pricing problem to them. But it was kind of a financial discussion, not really a legal discussion, right?
Right.
So I hope I'm not boring you, but what I'm coming all the way back to now is if this woman really thought that this guy was her lawyer, and actually they acted as her lawyer, they may have had a duty to give her a little better advice on the contract than they did. On the other hand, and I don't know the parties, and I don't know the relationships, et cetera.
Right.
The lawyer may come back and say, here, I've got my notepad from when I met with her, and I told her that the farm was probably worth more than that. And she told me she didn't care because old Bob, besides plowing the field, used to come in and drink iced tea with her.
Right.
And that she didn't really care. She thought it was a fair price, and she didn't care if it was a windfall for him because she really liked him. And that's just what she wanted. And Mr. Rominger, there's plenty of lawyers in Carlisle if you want to give me grief.
Right.
So,
well, the red flag came up because this farmer
Uh-huh.
had another piece of land right across the street from where this farm sits, and he sold 10 acres for the same price that he gave her for 90 acres of tillable land.
Okay.
So, and the lawyer represented him in that also.
So it sounds like the lawyer was representing both of these people pretty regularly.
It's a small farming community.
Yeah. You know,
in southern York County.
Yeah, and that happens. And you can ethically represent both sides to a transaction, but you're right. That's particularly where you have to be careful. So if I have cases where occasionally people come in and they say, we're going to buy and sell some land, we want you to do both sides, okay? My first evaluation is are these guys cousins or related somehow? Because that gives me another level of comfort, if that makes sense.
Right.
If they don't know each other from Adam, then I'm a little more worried. But still, it wouldn't have hurt to put in together a letter that says, listen, you guys want to do this. Here's the potential conflicts. I'm assuming you understand value. I guess both sides are fully versed on value, and here's how you could determine value if you chose to.
How about after the fact?
Well, what do you mean after the fact?
It's a done deal.
Well, right. Now it's after the fact, and the question would become, can you undo it or potentially sue the lawyer for malpractice? Those are your two avenues. And doing the deal is probably not possible. The estate could potentially sue the other side for fraud, but that guy's going to say, hey, I just offered a price.
Right.
It was between her and the lawyer. I mean, I don't know. I was expecting a counteroffer, and I never. That's right. Here's the testimony. I was expecting a counteroffer, and I never got one.
Right. And there's no one that can say, no, that's not true, because she's deceased.
Correct. And so the only way to do it would be to prove malpractice, to basically say that the lawyer had undertaken some level of representation of this woman and had enough of a fiduciary duty to her that he shouldn't have allowed her to enter in. Now, it's helpful that she's the proverbial little old lady, right?
Right, 100 years old. Yep.
Yeah, it helps quite a bit there that he should have been extra careful.
Okay.
All right. I'm sorry, that's a really long-winded explanation, but as
no,
you
I
can
appreciate it. Yeah, no, because those are the same kind of questions we're going through as holding this estate and having an agreement, a 1% payment a year. $25,000 a year for 15 years.
Right.
At 1%.
At 1%. And, of course, you can do that right now because the allowable interest rates are so low. A few years back, 1% would have been per se unacceptable.
Yeah, it just seems like the guy didn't have to take out a mortgage because all he has to do is come up with $25,000 a year, which he can do very easily, and only pay 1% for the money.
Right. And that percentage rate seems a little low. It's not impossible. I'm telling you right now, it's not unusual to see business contracts and loans and sales with carrying costs very low because, what happens is if I buy a business from you or a piece of land, okay?
Yes.
And I want to carry paper on it or debt on it and pay interest on it, the IRS will look at it funny if the interest rate is too low.
Right.
Because that's suspicious. But the allowable interest rate that they have now is like 1% or less between two people doing a transaction like that. So if I wanted to sell you a business and you were my brother-in-law, okay, we'd always be suspicious that if you were my brother-in-law, I was giving you a sweetheart rate. So back in the old days, if I sold you the business and we discovered that the interest rate was 1%, but the average interest rate was 8% in the economy, we knew, therefore, that was not an arm's-length transaction because no business person would do that. You actually got it because you're my brother-in-law, so that changes the tax treatment, okay?
Right.
On the other hand, now we say, okay, what is the actual interest rate? And so when we have families doing transactions and other people, we'll hold them to what the market rate is, which is around 1%, okay? But that doesn't answer the question of why I would extend a 1% interest rate to somebody who is just a normal hand-length business person as a term of a contract. That's ridiculous because I can get better than 1% for longer-term investments.
And if you're going to do the market rate 1% interest, why not do the market rate for the value of the property? Right.
And why not do the market rate for what you would get? That market rate's like the low end. I mean, if she had sold the property outright and put all that money, she could probably find somewhere that would have paid her 3%, maybe 2.5% safely, right?
Yeah.
So 1% seems suspicious, too.
Yeah.
All right, my friend, I got to go to break.
Thank you.
Thank you. 540-0580. Well. Okay, let's talk about, since I don't get to talk on Mondays and Fridays anymore, I don't get to play politics, let's talk about Syria briefly. What the hell just happened? Russia and Syria just outmaneuvered Obama. I saw on Facebook someone had posted that Obama's the Antichrist, and somebody else said if he was, he'd screw that up too. I thought that was funny, but I think it's apt. Here's what happened. Syria has done something terrible, which is gas its own people. And it's something that we've long said, and I firmly believe as the international community cannot allow to happen. Then the Obama administration gets a spine and says, we're going to use force. Then they somehow make an offhand remark, supposedly offhand remark. You always wonder if that wasn't designed to see if they couldn't get somebody to bite. And Vlad the Destroyer jumped right on board and said, okay, yeah, let's all agree that they'll turn their weapons over to international control. Now, in the meantime, we've learned that they've been scattering them to 50 sites. And we know that everybody who has chemical weapons and weapons of mass destruction, and Iran with the nukes and Korea with the nukes, that this international regime of inspectors and keeping them in compliance becomes a endless game of cat and mouse. And then in reality, Iran's dutifully building a bomb, and 2 years from now, Syria will still have chemical weapons. But what did Assad get out of it? Assad needed not to be hit militarily. He's in the middle of an entrenched civil war, which he's probably going to win, particularly with the help of the Russians. So, long story short, we just overplayed our hand, then we underplayed our hand, and then we got smoothed right off the table. So, long story short, Syria has outmaneuvered the United States with the help of Russia, and it's a travesty of international justice because all you little dictators can take a lesson from this, that yes, you can occasionally gas your people, and if you do it all the right ways and say all the right things at all the right times, and you can angle a little geopolitical help from an American rival like Russia or China, or maybe India for that matter, you'll get away with it. Now, that's the political analysis on Syria for today. If you guys want to talk about it, feel free to call in. Otherwise, we're just going to do legal questions, 540-0580. Ray, you're on the air. Hey,
yes,
Ray.
Sir. Thanks for taking my call, sir.
No problem.
I have a question. I was with a lady 20 years, never married. Is there common law marriage in Pennsylvania?
There is common law marriage in Pennsylvania, but it was abolished in 2004, but it wasn't abolished absolutely. So in 2004, the courts had started to abolish common law marriage, or tried to, and the Commonwealth Court decided a decision in the context of a workers' compensation claim saying that there would be no common law marriage in Pennsylvania if the Supreme Court were to rule on it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The parties then settled the claim, and it never made it to the Supreme Court. And I brought this little detail, only to point out that, very interestingly, courts can only decide cases that are in front of them, and if the parties withdraw the case, there's no longer a case in front of the court. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So even though the Commonwealth Court decided it and the Supreme Court probably would have taken it, the parties just backed it out, and they had no power to take it. So the Commonwealth Court case became the law. The Pennsylvania Superior Court, who has equal jurisdiction in terms of its level of jurisdiction, just slightly different matters, the Superior Court, then issued a series of decisions saying that the Commonwealth Court doesn't really speak for nothing, doesn't really understand this issue per se. And by the way, their decision was limited to workers' compensation and not marriage law in general, therefore, too bad, so sad. But the legislature and Rendell then rushed through something killing common law marriage in Pennsylvania, but somebody else pointed out that a lot of people have been relying on the fact that there was a common law marriage. So they said, to the extent that your common law marriage was created before January 1, 2004, it's a common law marriage. To the extent your common law marriage was created after January 1, 2004, that can't happen because you can't create one after that date.
Okay. Hey, we bought some property, too, during this time. We're splitting up.
Now, let's talk.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, let's talk about this for a second. So how do you know you're common law married? Here's the answer. Pennsylvania law says an in presente, this is great Latin, right? In presente, meaning in the present agreement to marry is a common law marriage. And in futuro, or in the future agreement to marry, is an engagement and therefore not a common law marriage. So literally, you and your spouse would have gone into the backyard under the gazebo, looked into each other's eyes, turned to the moon and said, I want to be married. And she would say, I want to be married. And when do you want to be married? I want to be married right now. Me too. Boom, contract, married, okay? Now, who's going to testify to that? Well, the only time whether there's a common law marriage comes up in court or not is when there's a disagreement. And usually in the disagreement, it's going to be somebody's advantage to be married and somebody's advantage not to be married, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the guy who has to pay spousal support, or the woman who has to pay alimony, or the one who's got the best property angle on being single is going to say there was never a common law marriage. The other party is going to say, no, we went out to the gazebo and stared at the moon and did all the things Carl said and agreed to be married right then and there under God and man and everything. And the judge is going to say, I have no idea to tell who's lying or not. So courts have developed a historical set of rules, and here's what it is. Did you hold yourself out as married? And so what we look for is not what you guys tell us happened, okay, but rather what you did. So if you sent Christmas cards from Ray and Yvonne to, the kids, or if you signed it, whatever your last name, Ray Smith and Yvonne Smith, and you filed tax returns as husband and wife.
No.
So here, and you registered at the hotels instead of putting in, Bob Smith. You put your real names into the Motel 6 register in the middle of the night. Things like that as husband and wife. So that becomes the issue for whether there was a common law marriage or not. And the only other way that we get common law marriages is a lot of health insurance companies used to say, if you want to get your spouse on coverage, they have to be your spouse, okay? So they would send you a form to fill out, and that form would create a common law marriage because it was a in presente affidavit of marriage. So a lot of people, particularly with the state health system, a lot of state workers that were cohabitating with somebody would send this in to get them on the benefits, and that is a marriage if it was signed prior to 2004.
Well, we never did any of that, so that's out. But
Probably not married.
Not married.
So now you're just in a bad, messy partnership.
Well, here's the thing. I bought some property. I bought a property myself.
Hold on. We're going to talk about it after the break. 540-0580. All right. Ray. Okay, Ray.
Yes, sir.
All right. So we were talking about common law marriage. What did you guys – you don't have a common law marriage. So what did you guys do? You bought some property.
I bought a lot myself.
Okay.
I saved some money, paid $40,000 for it. Saved some money, started building a house, built the house. It wasn't completely finished. It was under shell and everything to do the inside. And she contributed some money, and so we became joint tenants on it. Now, I had the house constructed. When I put her on as joint tenants, I had a plat plan drawn up, taken to the courthouse, added her name, but the house was already done, prior to her. It wasn't completed, but it was built and erected, under roof. Everything was done, but a little bit of painting and carpeting. Added her name to it, and she contributed some funds, but hardly any. And a couple of years later, we bought a investment property. I might have spent $5,000 more than her. We were joint tenants on that also. She spent X amount of dollars. I spent X plus $5,000. And now I got a CMA done on them, and she's like being unrealistic. It's like she wants to keep the one and then she says she wants both of them. It's like, well, you have to pay me. And it's like, well, I bought the property prior to putting you on as joint tenants. I built the property prior. Then I added you on. You contributed very little. You want it all?
Well,
how do I stand?
And that's an interesting question because you can make a gift of land. You realize that, right?
No, I don't realize anything. I really don't. I'm not,
And I mean it like that is, listen, if I said to you, if I was your dad, right?
Right.
And I said, Ray, my boy, you've been a good son. I would like to make you an owner of the family farm.
Mm-hmm.
How would we do that? I'd put you on the deed, right?
Okay.
That's delivery of land.
Okay.
So in order to have a gift, you have to have two things. You have to have delivery and law students, drum roll. No, donative intent, okay? So you have to have the intent. Okay. Donative intent is the shorthand for the intent to make the gift. So there has to be two things for a gift to be valid. There has to be intent and delivery. Now, there's an exceptions to delivery, like a gift cause mortis, which means when I'm laying dying and I say I want Bessie to have my jewelry collection, I can't literally make delivery, but we say because it was a gift in contemplation of death, we're going to waive the physical delivery rule, right?
Okay.
Well, physical delivery of land, I can't pick the 100-acre farm up and carry it over to your house and drop it off. I could do that with a set of golf clubs, right? So let me give you an example. I pick up a set of golf clubs and I drop them off at your house, and later the facts show that I'm left-handed and you're right-handed, and they were right-handed clubs, right? And the facts show that your birthday was the Saturday before, and it turns out we've been best friends and golfing buddies for 30 years. Now, somehow a dispute comes up, you run over my kid the next day, and I claim that I was just loaning you the golf clubs, and you're going to assert gift. You're probably going to win because the facts tend to show, right, to a reasonable person that I couldn't possibly have bought the wrong-handed clubs for myself right around the time of your birthday and delivered them to you, right? So we feel comfortable because based on the delivery and then the attenuating circumstances, even though you and I are arguing over whether there was a gift or not, it sure seems like a gift would be the answer, okay? So you have to have that intent as well as the delivery. So now let's back up. So you made delivery, my friend, okay? But did you have the intent? So we want to know what the relationship of the parties was, what the understandings of the parties were, and the side asserting gift has the burden of proof. So that helps you because you're not asserting gift, right?
Right.
You're saying, I put you on this, but you owe me for it. She's got to prove gift by clear and convincing evidence because we don't like gifts in the law. Gifts get in the way of contracts. Gifts get in the way of orderly business. So we don't start with the proposition that it's a gift. We start with the proposition it wasn't a gift, and then she has to prove it. Now, in some cases, gifts are easily proven, like the golf clubs I told you about, right?
Right.
Here in these relationships, if you look at like who paid the bills on things, if you look at the status of your relationship, was there any business angles to adding her? What were the intents of the parties? She may still be able to give you a run for your money on the gift argument because adding people to deeds willy-nilly as joint tenants with right of survivorship tends to suggest what? That if something happens to you, who do you want to have it?
Right.
I mean, in other words, you've removed it from your own lineage tree. So that's a pretty good argument. So that's the long answer. It's not clear-cut. On the other hand, if I'm her lawyer, I'd say be careful because you may overplay your hand and end up in a position where the judge finds some or all of this was not a gift. I once represented a strikingly beautiful woman who was claiming that a guy sued her for a lot of money, and she was saying it was a gift. And I convinced the court that it was a gift. And I think it helped that he was a high-income earner and she was a strikingly beautiful woman, and the court probably bought my argument that it looks like he was trying to woo her with gifts, right?
Right.
So he can't complain now that they're no longer together that those things weren't gifts. And that argument prevailed. On the other hand, if the gift seems disproportionate to your income or your wealth level, then perhaps it isn't a gift. In other words, if somebody's giving up 33% of their income to try to woo the beautiful woman, it may be a gift. But if they're giving up 100% of their income or their property, perhaps it wasn't contemplated as a gift. So there are a lot of factors we'd have to look at, Ray. Okay?
Yeah. Well, I have a question. Okay.
Well, hurry up because you're taking up everybody else's time.
All right. We can't negotiate. She doesn't. I get the CMA. We can't negotiate. So it goes to the court, and you have to sell it at auction.
Yep.
I put in more money than her. I bought the lot. I invested in it. I mean, how's it get broke down? I have it.
Well, if you made a gift, that's what you're not getting my point. If it's a gift, then you guys own it equally, right?
Okay, then we split it. Okay, that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
So there's no bearing if I put the money up front and build it and all that.
Well, if it's not a gift, that's a huge bearing.
Okay.
All right? But next time you go to decide to put somebody on your deed, you better think long and hard about it.
Never do it again. That's what happens when you fall in love and you're stupid.
Right. And that's the issue, my friend.
Well, there's one blessing, though. I never did get married, so she's only getting 10% of what I have.
That's the
only
best.
thing. That's the only way I can look at it, man.
That's right. All right. Talk to me off the air sometime.
Hey, good job.
All
well, I'm coming in to see you. I have an appointment set up.
All right, boss. Bye. 540-0580. Mike, you want to talk about Syria?
Yeah, hey, I just want to make a quick comment because you were saying some other stuff about that. So you believe that the government, the Syrian government, gassed their own people. You believe that?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Would you say, though, it's not too far-fetched to not believe this administration because of all the scandals? You would see how one or many people may believe, well, I just don't know. I mean,
well, actually, I'll buy that, Mike, only because the IRS is being manipulated by the Obama administration to take out conservatives, only because the NSA is being manipulated to spy on all of us, and nobody seems to care, and only because they consistently lie about it again and again and again. So I'm sort of with Putin. Show us the evidence. But I suspect Obama did not really want to get involved in Syria. So my suspicion is they'd have the goods. They didn't really want to go that way. But good point. Got to go to break. 540-0580. I want to get back. We'll do another hour of your legal questions. 540-0580. Carl Rominger here. See you in a few minutes.